right, welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going deep, really deep into the thought of Gaṅgeśa Upatiya, this major, like a big deal, 14th century Indian philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you're here with us, you probably love getting to the heart of like super complex ideas. You want to understand things, without getting lost in the weeds.
Absolutely.
And, we all love those moments, right? When something just clicks and you suddenly get it.
All those aha moments.
Exactly, the aha moments. And that's exactly what we're aiming for today with Gaṅgeśa's Jewel, this really incredible work. We want to give you this concentrated dose, like a shot of espresso, of his most potent philosophical insights.
I like that.
And we're going to look specifically at how his work shows us, illuminates what it means to, how to act like a philosopher.
That's a great way to frame it.
Yeah.
Gaṅgeśa himself, he's often called the great professor, actually marks a real turning point in the Nyaya school of Indian philosophy.
Okay.
He kind of ushers in this period that's known as New Logic.
New Logic.
Navya Nyaya, it's called. Think of it as a significant upgrade to like their whole approach to knowledge and how we reason.
Got it. So this is 14th century.
Mm-hmm. 14th century.
14th century India, we've got Gaṅgeśa, a big shift in how people are thinking about logic, about knowledge.
And his work, The Jewel, it becomes super important, like foundational for centuries to come.
Wow.
It even brings in ideas from this other school, the Vaisheshika school.
Okay, so Gaṅgeśa was not just like some random scholar.
Oh, no.
His Jewel is like the book, the go-to for Nyaya thinkers for like ages. It's overshadowing even earlier work, right?
That's right. It's almost like, imagine like a groundbreaking scientific paper that comes out. Yeah. And it completely shifts, the direction of an entire field.
And this ties in really nicely with what we're focusing on today, right? This idea of acting like a philosopher. Because Gaṅgeśa, he gives us this meticulous, this super detailed breakdown of like the different ways we know things. We've got perception, we've got inference, analogy, testimony. And he really dissects these core tools, these core processes of how we do philosophy.
And it's not just about listing them out, right? It's about examining how they work.
Exactly.
How they fit together, where they can go wrong, the whole picture.
He's like giving us this amazing framework for understanding how we understand.
And if we zoom out a little bit, right, we see that Gaṅgeśa's Jewel, it's not just a collection of conclusions.
Right.
It's showing us how to do philosophy, how to act as philosophers.
He's walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly, and doing it with incredible rigor. He's analyzing the very foundation upon which we build all understanding.
So for this deep dive, we're relying on what I think is a fantastic resource, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy entry on Gaṅgeśa. It's a really great overview of his life, his work, all of it.
It's incredibly thorough and well-researched, a great starting point for anyone wanting to dive into Gaṅgeśa.
Absolutely. So let's start, by setting the scene. 14th century India, we're in Mithila.
Northeastern India.
Northeastern India. Okay, and this is where our main character, Gaṅgeśa, he lived and worked. He was a highly respected teacher, right?
Very much so. A true master of his time.
He taught Nyaya, which we've mentioned. It's all about logic, clear reasoning.
Mm-hmm. And he was also a master of Mimamsa.
Oh, right. Mimamsa.
Which is this whole other school of thought focused on interpreting the Vedas, these ancient texts, and the rituals associated with them.
Okay, so already we can see Gaṅgeśa is not just stuck in one little corner of thought. He's engaging with different ideas, different traditions.
Exactly. And this ability to synthesize different philosophical traditions, it's a key part of who he is. He supported, for instance, Udayana's interpretation of Nyaya, which had already absorbed, incorporated ideas from Vaisheshika.
Right.
But he was also, as we said, a master of Mimamsa. He's not afraid to bring in ideas from different sources.
He's like playing in this really rich intellectual sandbox.
Absolutely. And that's such a crucial part of being a philosopher, I think.
Yeah.
Being open to different viewpoints, being able to see how they connect, where they clash.
And it sounds like he had a pretty broad intellectual background.
Oh, yes.
Grammar, epic poems, scriptures.
Like Patini, the Bhagavad Gita.
So he's not just a one-trick pony.
No. He's drawing on this vast body of knowledge.
This wide lens.
And this must have shaped his philosophical approach in a profound way.
And it's interesting because, he wasn't just some some guy working in isolation.
Very far from it.
He became really famous, didn't he?
He did, in his own time. He even earned the title Jagadguru.
Jagadguru.
Yeah, which the Stanford Encyclopedia entry says basically translates to Distinguished University Professor.
So he's like the rock star professor of his day.
Basically.
Everybody knows him. Everyone's reading his stuff. And it's his jewel that really cements this reputation, right?
The Stanford entry emphasizes just how popular this work became. It actually overshadows the works that came before it, which is, quite remarkable.
And it's a testament, I think, to the power of rigorous, comprehensive thought. His work resonated, not just because it was new, but because it was so thorough and insightful.
It's almost like he set a new standard for philosophical discourse,
Yeah.
Like his methodology, it becomes the benchmark.
The gold standard. And what's so striking is how systematically he examines the sources of knowledge, the foundation of how we understand anything. We're talking about how we perceive the world, how we draw conclusions, how we use analogies, how we rely on testimony, like the building blocks of knowledge.
And by scrutinizing these processes, he's essentially providing a blueprint for how to act as a philosopher.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, this leads us to something really important about Gaṅgeśa's work, and that's his primary focus. It was epistemology.
Right.
The theory of knowledge.
He's not just asking, what is real or what's the ultimate nature of reality. Right. He's asking, how do we know anything at all?
It's that more fundamental question about the very process of knowing.
And this emphasis, it's central to what it means to do philosophy.
And it's interesting because, the Stanford entry mentions that while his focus is on knowledge, he's still building on this long-standing system for understanding reality, right? This framework that he inherited from Udayana.
That's right.
So even revolutionary thinkers, they're not building everything from scratch. They're building on what came before, refining, evolving.
It's like philosophical progress. It's often about taking what we already have and pushing it further, making it more nuanced.
Yeah. So what's really relevant here, for our focus on acting like a philosopher, is how Gaṅgeśa examines these specific tools.
The ones we just listed?
Perception, inference, analogy, testimony.
These are the ways we as human beings interact with the world, gather information, try to make sense of things.
The ways we build our understanding.
And by analyzing these, he's not just giving us abstract theories. He's giving us a practical guide to philosophical thinking.
And his position on knowledge itself, on how we confirm that we actually know something, that's really interesting too, right? He argued for what's called this extrinsicality view.
Right, which essentially challenges the idea that knowledge is self-validating.
Okay, so unpack that a little bit.
So there's this view, right, that if you know something, that knowledge itself, it's enough.
It speaks for itself.
It's automatically justified.
Yeah.
Gaṅgeśa, he's pushing back against that.
He's saying, hold on, how do we know we know?
Exactly.
We need something else, something external to validate that knowledge.
And this is such a crucial move, philosophically speaking. He's introducing this element of doubt.
The possibility that we could be wrong.
Precisely. And this opens the door to skepticism.
Which is so central to, real critical thinking.
And to critical evaluation, right? We can't just accept things at face value. We have to constantly be asking, okay, but how do I know I'm right?
Love that. So we've got these tools. We've got this need to be skeptical, to validate our knowledge. How does Gaṅgeśa actually apply all this?
Well, let's dive into his analysis of each tool, starting with perception.
All right. Perception, how we experience the world through our senses.
He defines perception as factive.
Meaning?
Meaning it produces real, genuine knowledge. It's not just about, being aware of something.
It's about actually grasping it, understanding it.
And for us as aspiring philosophers, this emphasizes the importance of pursuing truth.
Not just surface-level opinions.
Exactly. We're after genuine understanding.
And this leads us to, I think, one of the most fascinating aspects of perception, the whole question of illusion. Gaṅgeśa called it anyathakyati-vada.
It's this classic philosophical problem. How do we know that what we perceive, what we see, hear, feel, is actually real?
It's the appearance of something as other than as it is.
Right. Our senses can deceive us. We can misinterpret things.
So how do we know when we're being tricked? How do we know when our perception is accurate?
These are the questions a philosopher has to grapple with.
And Gaṅgeśa, he tackles this head on. Then there's this really interesting concept he introduces, indeterminate perception.
Nirvikapaka.
Nirvikapaka, okay. This is like a pre-conceptual stage of sensory processing.
Right, like imagine there's this raw data stream coming in from our senses
Okay.
before our minds start labeling things,
Yeah.
categorizing them.
Before we slap on our conceptual frameworks.
Exactly. This is that raw, uninterpreted experience.
And this gets to a fundamental question in philosophy, right?
Oh, absolutely. Where do our concepts come from?
How do we move from this raw sensory data to having these categories and ideas?
It's a puzzle philosophers have been wrestling with for centuries.
And then there's this other concept, apperception.
Anuvyavasaya, or perceiving a preceding thought.
Okay, so this is like being aware of our own thinking.
Right. We're not just thinking about the world. We can step back and think about our own thoughts.
We're watching our minds work.
And this self-awareness, it's crucial for any philosopher.
Yeah, because we need to be able to critically evaluate our own reasoning, right? Identify our biases, our assumptions.
We need that metacognitive ability.
Exactly.
And Gaṅgeśa, he recognizes this.
All right, so we've talked about perception, this incredibly rich and complex tool.
Mm-hmm. And now we move on to, I think, one of the most central tools in Gaṅgeśa's work, inference.
Inference. How we draw conclusions based on evidence and reasoning.
And the Stanford entry really emphasizes that this was a cornerstone of his philosophical approach.
Okay, so give us like the Gaṅgeśa lowdown on inference.
Well, he starts by defining a key concept called pervasion.
Pervasion.
Yeah, vyapti in Sanskrit. It's this idea that there's this constant, invariable connection between two things.
Okay, so like if we know A is always followed by B.
Right, and if we see A, we can confidently infer that B is also present.
It's like cause and effect, but broader.
Exactly. And for Gaṅgeśa, this pervasion, this connection, it has to be absolutely rock solid.
Otherwise, the whole inference crumbles.
And this emphasis on precision and rigor, it's a hallmark of his approach.
But how do we know, like, how do we come to understand these connections in the first place?
Well, Gaṅgeśa argues that we rely on inductive processes, observing patterns in the world, drawing conclusions from those patterns.
So basically, we look at lots of examples.
Right, which he called Dayanta.
And we say, okay, this seems to always be the case.
And from there, we can make broader inferences.
Now, this, of course, brings up the whole philosophical question of induction, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like, how do we know that just because something has always happened in the past, it will continue to happen in the future?
It's a tricky problem, and philosophers have been debating this for centuries.
But for Gaṅgeśa, this inductive process is central to how we build knowledge through inference.
Okay, so we're observing patterns, drawing conclusions, but there's more to it than that, right?
Right. Gaṅgeśa also introduces this idea of hypothetical reasoning.
Okay, Tarka.
Tarka. And this is basically a way to, like, test out our inferences to see if they hold up.
Okay, so it's like taking our inference and saying, okay, what if this wasn't true?
Exactly. What are the implications? Does it lead to contradictions?
Does it make sense in the real world?
And he identifies different types of Tarka. Like, one is showing that accepting an opponent's view leads to absurd conclusions.
Okay, so like reductio ad absurdum.
Precisely. Another type is showing that it leads to infinite regress, like an endless chain of causes with no beginning.
And these are classic philosophical moves, right?
They're still used today in philosophical debates.
Powerful tools in philosophers' arsenal.
And Gaṅgeśa, he was a master of these techniques.
But even with all this, even with rigorous observation and hypothetical reasoning, there's still the possibility of making mistakes, right?
Oh, for sure. And this is where his analysis of fallacies comes in.
Hetvabasa.
And he also introduces this really important concept called the additional condition, or upadi.
Okay, so fallacies, these are like common errors in reasoning.
Right, and he identifies a whole bunch of them.
And the additional condition.
This is basically something that can, like, mess up our inference.
Okay, how so?
Well, imagine you're trying to infer something.
Okay.
And there's this hidden factor, this additional condition that you haven't considered.
And that factor can, like, skew the whole inference.
Exactly. And one of the fallacies he talks about, the defeated fallacy, it's a perfect example of this. It's this idea that our existing knowledge, our preconceived notions, they can sometimes lead us to make faulty inferences.
So even when we think we're being logical, we can still be biased.
And this is a really important point for anyone trying to think clearly and rationally. We have to be aware of our own biases, constantly questioning our assumptions.
So we've covered perception, inference, two of the most, like, heavy-hitting philosophical tools. What about analogy? Where does that fit in?
Analogy, or upamana for Gaṅgeśa, it was primarily a way to learn the meanings of words.
Interesting.
Now, that might seem kind of limited, right?
Yeah, a little bit narrow.
But actually, it reflects something really fundamental about philosophy.
Okay, what's that?
It's about understanding and communicating complex ideas. Language is our tool for doing this.
And analogies can be really helpful for grasping new concepts, right?
Exactly. The classic example he uses is learning what a Gaṅgeśa is, which is a
Okay.
type of wild ox. And he says, we learn this word by understanding that a Gaṅgeśa is similar to a cow.
Okay, so we're using something we already know to build understanding of something new.
And this process of comparison, it's really common in philosophical thinking. We often use analogies to explain abstract ideas to make them more concrete.
So while it might seem simple, analogy plays a surprisingly important role in philosophy.
Absolutely.
And finally, we have testimony.
Shabda.
Shabda, okay? This is about relying on the knowledge, the expertise of others.
And Gaṅgeśa, he actually defends this as a legitimate source of knowledge.
Which might seem kind of obvious, right?
Well, there's this philosophical question. How do we know that what someone else is telling us is actually true?
We're taking it on faith, to some extent.
And Gaṅgeśa, he recognizes that.
Mhm.
But he argues that if certain conditions are met, testimony can be a reliable source of knowledge.
Okay, so what are these conditions?
Well, he focuses on what makes a statement true from the perspective of the listener.
So it's not just about the speaker's intention, it's also about how the listener interprets it.
Exactly. And one of the conditions he mentions is semantic fit,
Yogyata.
yugyata. This means that the words being used have to make sense in the context of what's being said.
Okay, so there has to be, like, coherence.
Right. The meaning has to be consistent.
And he also engages with different theories of meaning, right?
Like those from the Bhatia and Prabhakara schools.
So he's really delving into the nuances of language here.
And this is all about highlighting the importance of clarity and precision in philosophical discourse.
And then there's his discussion of indirect indication.
Like,
Yeah. This is like where the meaning goes beyond the literal.
exactly. It's about how we can convey meaning through suggestion, through implication.
Which, of course, is incredibly important in interpreting philosophical texts, where there's so much subtlety and nuance.
And he argues for the use of Lacan based on principles of economy and experience. He's saying, basically, that it's a more efficient way to communicate. And it reflects how we actually use language in the real world.
It's a really insightful point about the complexities of language and how we make meaning.
And it shows how Gaṅgeśa is really attuned to the intricacies of philosophical discourse.
So we've covered these four major sources of knowledge, perception, inference, analogy, testimony. But Gaṅgeśa wasn't just, theorizing about these things in the abstract. He also put forward some really interesting inferences of his own. Right?
He did. The Stanford entry mentions several of these, including arguments for the existence of a self,
Okay.
a divine being, and the possibility of liberation.
Now, these weren't just about, supporting the specific doctrines of his school, right? The Nyaya school.
No. They were also demonstrations of his philosophical method in action.
He's showing us how to apply these tools, these concepts, to some really big questions.
And his argument for the self, for instance, it relies on a type of reasoning called negative-only inference.
Okay, what's that?
It's basically where you infer something exists based on what it's not.
Okay.
And he also uses what are called eliminative arguments.
So you're, ruling out all other possibilities.
Exactly. And this leads you to the conclusion that the self must exist.
It's a very specific, logical strategy.
And it highlights the diversity of philosophical tools that are out there.
And his argument for the existence of a divine being, that's a classic one, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it involves this back and forth, this debate with potential counter-arguments, the additional condition we talked about earlier. It's a really great example of how philosophical arguments can play out, how they evolve through challenge and response.
And it's in this argument that he uses Tarka, that hypothetical reasoning, to argue for the simplest explanation.
Right. This idea that, all other things being equal, the simplest explanation is usually the best one.
It's a powerful principle in philosophy and science.
And finally, there's his inference regarding the possibility of liberation.
Mukti.
Mukti, yes. And this one uses the analogy of a lamp's flame going out.
So he's connecting this really profound concept to something we can, visualize.
Exactly. And it shows how philosophical reasoning can be applied to questions of ultimate concern.
About the big questions about life, death, and what it all means.
The questions that have captivated philosophers for millennia.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Gaṅgeśa's thought, it's clear that his jewel is this incredibly rich tapestry of philosophical inquiry. It's deeply engaged with understanding how we know what we know.
And with those core tools that we use to build knowledge, to make sense of the world.
You know, his rigorous analysis, his meticulous breakdown of perception, inference, analogy, testimony, coupled with his just really impressive command of argumentation.
And his willingness to engage with diverse perspectives, to synthesize ideas from different schools of thought.
It all adds up to this really compelling picture of what it means to act as a philosopher.
It's about being rigorous, being skeptical, constantly examining our assumptions.
And I think, for our listeners, for those of you who really appreciate getting to the heart of complex ideas,
without getting bogged down in the details.
Escha's work offers this amazing masterclass, in systematic thinking, in how to approach those really fundamental concepts.
And those aha moments, the ones we all love.
They come from seeing his method in action, recognizing the enduring relevance of these questions he was grappling with, centuries ago.
And I think it leaves us with this really provocative question. How can we apply what Gaṅgeśa taught us to the world we live in today?
Right.
This world that's overflowing with information, with competing narratives.
He's like, we're drowning in information. How do we sift through it all? Figure out what's true, what's valuable?
Exactly. Does Gaṅgeśa's work give us a framework, a set of tools for navigating this complexity?
For evaluating claims, for building a solid understanding, for not just accepting what we're told, but actually thinking for ourselves.
And I think this deep dive, it encourages all of us to reflect on our own processes of learning, of knowing.
How do we know what we know?
Maybe with a newfound appreciation for the rigorous and nuanced approach of, this brilliant mind from the 14th century.
And the enduring power of philosophy itself.
To help us make sense of the world, no matter how complex it becomes.
And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into Gaṅgeśa's thought.
We hope you found it insightful, maybe even a little bit challenging.
And as always, thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.